Hello everyone, welcome to Sentinel. Today's topic is going to be a hard one. And the reason for this is because we all know that in combat, casualties happen. And they happen due to enemy action. But unfortunately, casualties also happen due to friendly action. And this is called fratricide. And while researching for another topic, I stumbled upon this incident that I need to talk about. And it's an important one because not only did the incident happen, unfortunately, but the Marine Corps tried to cover it up or delayed the outcome for over 3 years. And I think it's important to talk about it so we learn these lessons and to ensure that it doesn't happen again. There's tactical lessons and there's moral lessons of how do you notify the loved ones and the next of kin. But before I get into it, I just want to thank everybody and remind them to hit a like, hit a subscribe, and continue to share the channel with your loved ones, with your neighbor, with your ex, mother-in-law, dogs, cats, and goldfish. Much appreciated. The second admin note that I have is, as I've mentioned before, I try to read every comment that's left by the viewer. I owe that to you because I learned from your comments as well. And the discussion is important to have. And I try to answer as many as I can, especially the pertinent ones. And then once in a while you get this unique comment that I bring up. And today's unique comment is somebody left a comment recommending that I go to my beautician and have them match my beard and my hair color. Well, here's the reality. Look, I don't know why my beard is lighter than my hair. I also have gray hair, but the reason you don't see it is because I use coconut oil, and the light probably reflects off of it. I don't know. But the issue is this. I have not even gone to a barber in over 45 years. I cut my own hair. I trim my own beard. I cut my own nails. I cut my own toenails. So I don't do manicure or pedicure, and I don't go to beauty salons. None of that horse shit. I fundamentally believe that men should not go to a beauty salon. And although I appreciate the advice, I'm not doing it. I'm very happy with the way I look, very comfortable. And I'll continue to use coconut oil. I highly recommend it. It's got antibacterial properties, and it's actually good for your skin. So anyway, so let's get back to the topic at hand. So there was an incident that happened on 12 April 2004 in the First Battle of Fallujah. This Marine incident that happened in Fallujah was 10 days prior to another incident that happened in Afghanistan where Pat Tillman was unfortunately killed due to friendly fire. And we all know about that incident. Maybe I'll do a podcast later on that, where the Army tried to cover it up and awarded Pat Tillman a Silver Star. Later on, it was found out that it was a fratricide incident, and the Army tried to embellish the facts and show that Pat Tillman was unfortunately killed due to enemy action, and that wasn't the truth. And there's several senior officers that covered up the truth in that incident, to include General Stanley McChrystal. So switching back to the Marine incident of 12 April 2004, there's a Marine Infantry Battalion in Fallujah, and they had one of their companies located in a schoolhouse, schoolyard. And about 100 to 400 meters forward of that company, the insurgents were placing tires and burning them. So they decided to call for fire using the 81 millimeter mortars and target the tires to dissipate this obstacle that was obscuring the company's position. When this fire mission was being processed, it was identified as danger close, and it was about 400 meters away, but in reality it was about 150 meters, right? My commander happened to walk into the Fire Support Coordination Center and approved the mission. Here's the fundamental issue. The incident happened, and stuff is going to happen in combat. I understand that. But you never cover up the truth. That's the fundamental problem. The battalion commander approves the fire mission, and the problem with that is when a battalion commander walks in and says, yeah, okay, go ahead, approved, they didn't quite go through the process of figuring out if this target one was legitimate, it was danger close, and should they validate the target through other means. So that never happened, right? Because the battalion commander stepped in and said, hey, I approve this fire mission, and they fired it off. And unfortunately, what happened was that mortar round landed in the schoolyard where the infantry company was. And there were 2 Marines that were killed, a dozen wounded, and there's also a third person that was killed, was an Iraqi interpreter. So the company at the receiving end of this mortar round starts calling it incoming, and the battalion commander knew that a mistake had happened. And so subsequently, an investigation followed into this incident. Now, here comes the tricky part. It took 3 years, for the investigation results to be shared with the families and next of kin, and also the wounded Marines. And this is just horseshit, in my opinion, because what they initially told the families were of the 2 Marines that were killed and the 1 Iraqi was this incident happened due to enemy action, and it was a lie. They lied. And the regimental commander, who I happen to know and later retired as a 3-star general, a phenomenal officer, really good officer, recommended that the 3 officers should be punished, to include the battalion commander, a congressman's son that I'll go into, and the fire support coordinator for the battalion, because they basically failed to follow procedures. So his recommendations went up to the division commander, who happened to be General Mattis. Mattis disagreed with them and said that nobody should be punished. And then that went up to the MEF commander, who was Lieutenant General Conway at the time, later on General Conway, Commandant of the Marine Corps. And he agreed with General Mattis. But the problem is this. None of these generals took the time out to make sure that the families were told the truth. And 3 years later, because of a lady by the name of Danny Tillman, Pat Tillman's mother, who pursued the truth in her son's incident, brought this in front of Congress. And finally, Congress got involved and started asking questions. And, what the hell happened here? And then the Marine Corps kind of, said, yeah, we made a mistake. And we didn't tell the truth. The Marine Corps admitted to that. And not a single person was held accountable. Not a single person was held accountable. Mattis ended up being a 4-star general and later on Secretary of Defense. Conway ended up being the Commandant of the Marine Corps. And the battalion commander ended up being a 3-star lieutenant general. And so there's no accountability whatsoever. And the sad part is, fratricide incidents will happen. Having been in combat, my biggest fear was fratricide incidents. And we really spent a ton of time to ensuring that our battlefield geometry and direct fire was always correct. And you have to just keep drilling that into the Marines' heads. And the reason battlefield geometry is very important, you got to have a 90-degree offset so you don't end up shooting friendly forces. So that's very important. And you also have to make sure that you're using proper marking so friendly forces can be identified in the heat of battle. That's important also. Now, when it comes to indirect fire weapon systems, it's extremely dangerous. You've got the observer looking at a target. You've got an aircraft or mortar position that's offset, and you got to make sure that everything is done properly. Otherwise, you're going to have fratricide incident. There was a case in Afghanistan where we had a danger close type situation where a B-1 dropped a JDAM on an enemy machine gun position. And we had to go through numerous procedures to make sure that our friendly forces, which are about 400 meters away, were at a safe distance. And the way we figured out the safe distance was the difference in altitude and the fragmentation pattern of the JDAM. But we went through this process with my air officer, with my forward air controllers, with the pilot of the aircraft, with the friendly forces. We had a liaison with them, make sure everybody's on the same sheet of music, and we're good with it. Ultimately, it was my decision. And, thankfully, everything worked out because we went through this analytical process to make sure that everybody would be safe. Now, getting back to this point, the issue I have with this whole incident is using mortars in an urban environment. Because in an urban environment, using a high trajectory indirect fire weapon system is quite dangerous. And the main reason is because the first round is never going to impact where you intend it to. And you always have to adjust on target. So I would not have recommended using mortars in an urban environment unless there's absolutely no friendly forces around the target. So that's number one. What I would have done if the insurgents are putting up these tires, obstacle tires, to deny you visibility and lighting the tires on fire, and you want to get rid of this obstacle, rather than using a mortar, an indirect weapon system on the target, perhaps consider a direct fire weapon system. What could have been used was either a javelin or AT-4 to destroy the target. Because that's much safer, and the reason being is you have control over the weapon system, and it's a direct fire weapon rather than this high trajectory weapon that's going to come down upon you. So that's something to think about. The issue comes down to this: why did it take the Marine Corps 3 years to finish the investigation and make it public. So that's the first issue. Then why did it take Congress to hold a hearing and start asking questions for the Marine Corps to come clean and say, you know what, yeah, we made a mistake here? Why didn't the Marine Corps admit to the mistake beforehand? That they had falsely informed the families that their next of kin were killed in a fratricide incident. I think that's very important. So the battalion commander knew that something had gone wrong. And he picked up the phone, he called the regimental commander, said, an incident's just happened, and we need to do an investigation. Good on him. Then the investigation happens, and the Marine Corps knew what had transpired, but they kept quiet about it for 3 years. And they informed the next of kin that their loved ones were killed by enemy action. But all this time, the troops knew something, because the Lance Corporal network is pretty strong in the military, and the troops knew the truth. There were 2 Marines that were killed, one by the name of Shooter and the other by the name of Zurhaid, and an Iraqi interpreter by the name of Shihab. And there's some serious injuries that took place. There's a Marine by the name of Smith that lost a leg and lost an eye and stuff. In many cases, the Marine Corps didn't even make the effort to go tell those who were wounded in the incident what had transpired. And finally, NPR, National Public Radio, did an investigation and stumbled upon this and started contacting the Marines and to let them know what transpired. And the sad part is when they tried to contact the senior officers, who are all retired by now, except for the battalion commander, they all started tap dancing. The battalion commander, who's a 3-star general, starts having memory issues. All of a sudden, he doesn't remember what he said in the JAG manual or in a previous interview with the NPR journalist, and starts changing his story around. General Mattis refuses to give an interview. He says, "Hey, I made my comments are known in the investigation, and I stand by them." So that was Mattis. General Conway, who's Mattis's boss at the time, forgets the incident. Doesn't recollect the incident. Okay, now that's understandable. You're a MEF commander in Iraq, but here's the issue. This was the biggest Marine fratricide issue, and you're telling me the commanding general doesn't remember it? I call horseshit on that. And there's another reason why I call horseshit. Because 2 days prior to you making the decision on approving General Mattis's decision, there's a Congressman Hunter, who was chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, visited with you in Fallujah in Iraq. And his son happened to be one of the officers that was involved in this incident by the name of Duncan Hunter. He was a lieutenant. He was an artillery liaison officer with this unit. And he was the one evidently was working in the Fire Sport Coordination Center at the time and was responsible to ensure the safety in plotting this target. And you're telling me that you couldn't connect the dots between the father, who's a very powerful congressman, and his son that's in your meth? Are you shitting me? That's a bold-faced lie, because you would know that you have a congressman's son in your meth. So that's the first part. The second part is you just happen to forget the incident? I mean, come on, General Conway. I know you. So this young lieutenant is the Marine Corps as a captain, Duncan Hunter, and I happened to have crossed paths with him when he was on a congressional delegation, and I happened to brief them on what was going on in Afghanistan. Now, at the time, I didn't know all this had happened because it was kept hush-hush. Duncan Hunter takes over his father's seat in Congress from San Diego, and then later on, 11 years later, he has to resign his seat for Congress because of various allegations against him. Misappropriation of government funds, he's and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'd rather not go into. And you can certainly Google him and find out. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks about, hey, today I'm going to have a fratricide issue. Stuff happens, fog of war. I get all that. And I get all that it's really the general officer's decision to hold people accountable or not hold them accountable. But here's the case. You've had, all these Marines, a fratricide incident happens in combat, and the battalion commander gets promoted to 3-star general. You got to be shitting me. Where's this notion of personal accountability and personal honor? And mistakes happen, but we got to hold ourselves accountable, and the institution also needs to hold people accountable. And let me tell you, lying is never tolerated in the Marine Corps, because we've got this thing called core values: honor, courage, and commitment. And as soon as you start compromising that, then the young troops see it, and then they're going to call horseshit. The thing that we have to remember is you can't bullshit the troops. Corporal John Smith, who lost a leg and an eye in this incident, and wasn't informed that it was a fratricide incident, until much later, says it best. He said it was disgusting. He says, we espouse the values of honor, courage, and commitment, and you want us to follow them, but when the ball falls on you, all of a sudden it's not important. And and that's what the young troops see this. They see this in our senior leadership, and they lose confidence. And the important part of the reason I bring up this story is, first of all, it should have never been swept under the rug. Danny Tillman pursued it, and it was brought out in the open. And if NPR hadn't pursued the story, we still wouldn't have known the truth. And the reason we need to know the truth is because we need to talk about both sides of combat. Not only how successful we were, but also the things that we failed. And failure is what helps us to become better. These incidents ought to be taught in all the schools, in NCO academies, staff NCO academies, and all the officer schools. Marines don't lie. And when mistakes happen, we raise our hand and we say, hey, a mistake happened. And then we hold ourselves accountable. If I was a battalion commander and this incident happened under my watch, I would have resigned or retired, hands down, because a mistake happened and lives were lost. And obviously, it's not intentional. Nobody says it is. But by covering it up and lying and then using the excuse as the battalion commander did when he knew the truth, because he's the one that said an official statement, as soon as that round landed, his heart sank. So he knew it was a friendly fire incident. But then he claims that he couldn't say anything because he's ordered not to. Well, if you elect not to say anything and go along with this cover-up, then you're just as guilty. And what I would have done is either spoke out and said, "Hey, a mistake has happened," and or I would have just retired. I would have said, "You know what? I screwed up. It happened on my watch, and I elect to retire, resign." Now we got to remember that great people like General Eisenhower already penned a letter prior to D-Day landings accepting responsibility for the failure of the landings in case they failed. And Admiral Nimitz had done the exact same thing in the Pacific Theater when he committed all our aircraft carriers, and if the battle had been lost, he'd also penned a letter accepting responsibility for his failures. And these are men of honor. And my question is, how many general officers in modern history have done that? Not a single one that I know of. Because what happens is we either try to cover up the incident, hopefully the families will forget about it, or we try to deflect. We try to blame it on the politicians. Afghanistan withdrawal is a classic example. Everybody's blaming Biden. I'm here to tell you, Biden has no freaking clue of what the difference is between a C-17, an 810, or an F-18. He has no clue. He relies on his generals. And if the generals are going to present him the course of actions that says, that it's viable for us to evacuate from Kabul, he's going to pick the easiest one because he trusts his generals. The other issue is, as a general officer, if you disagree with the chosen course of action, then have the moral courage to put your stars on the table and says, you know what, sir, I disagree, I can't execute. Because your troops expect you to do that. They expect their generals to stand up for them and value their lives instead of choosing a course of action that's going to throw away their lives. And we got to have this trust and confidence in our officer corps. Accidents are going to happen. I certainly accept that. And everybody understands that. And Danny Tillman says it the best. And because she has been going through this trauma of a mother losing her son and having been lied to. And then she has to go out and find the truth. And it takes her years to figure out what the hell just happened for the loss of her son. And she says it best. She says, and so to me, they just lie on a regular basis. And I don't know why they do that, because it's very damaging. She goes on to say they don't understand that families will accept the truth. But when you lie to them, you're basically gaslighting them. That just says it all. It's out of respect for the families, and they'll understand that mistakes happen. But by God, let's not lie to each other when mistakes happen to cover up our career or the reputation of the institution. The institution will become stronger if we accept our flaws and learn from them. Fortunately, these general officers, going all the way up to Conway, Mattis, and should have known better. I've got my hats off to the regimental commander who later on retired as a 3-star. I know him. I've never had the privilege to serve with him, but by reputation I know him. He's an honorable guy, and he did the right thing. He recommended that these people should be held accountable, and his recommendations were pushed aside for whatever reason. Mattis hasn't come out and told us why he decided that. And how could he tolerate these lives being lost? A dozen Marines wounded, three people killed, and no action was taken, none whatsoever. And that's on, in my opinion, that's on General Mattis and on General Conway for approving that. And it just shows you the value of the lives of our Marines and sailors and interpreters. They're meaningless, by their actions, because they think that we can just brush this under the rug and people are going to forget about it. My hat's off to NPR for bringing this out. Much respect for Danny Tillman, the mother of Pat Tillman, and my deepest condolences to the families. This should have never happened. Incidents like this will happen in war, but we should have never lied to you. I'd be interested in your thoughts. Should the military cover up tragic incidents, or should we always tell the truth? Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. That's all I got. Stay rugged. Stay united. Con out.